Hello and welcome to News Tonight on Rajya Sabha TV. I'm Aishwarya Kapoor. Now, India's economic growth disappoints at 7% in April to June quarter. So how serious is this issue? We figure out in this bulletin. Also, Law Commission has recommended that the death penalty must be abolished except in terror cases. That's another big story that we are going to follow. But first up, the headlines. GDP figures released for April to June. Economy grew at 7% in the quarter. Law Commission recommends abolition of death penalty in all except terror cases. 3 members dissent from the report. Government toughens stance on the one rank, one pension demand. Finance Minister rejects annual revision of pensions. Karnataka orders CID investigation into the murder of Kannada scholar M.M. Kalburgi. Thousands pay tributes to former Hampi University Vice Chancellor. And in cricket, India are on track to win the third test in Colombo, chasing a victory target of 386. Sri Lanka lose the 3 early wickets, giving India an edge on the final day. Well, today's biggest story, India's GDP growth slowed down a bit in the first quarter of the current financial year. The farm, services and manufacturing sectors also witnessed a slowdown in growth. The infrastructure sector's growth also showed a slowdown to a 3-month low. Here are the details. India's economic growth slowed to 7% in the first 3 months of the current financial year. Although the data shows that India continues to remain among the fastest growing major economy for a second straight quarter, it is a slump from the 7.5% growth in January to March. India's overall GDP growth for the previous financial year was at 7.3%, which is also higher than the first quarter. The concerns over economic growth rate hit the markets too, which lost over 100 points. Nifty also dropped below the 8,000 mark.
The GDP growth of 7% is an average growth. We already know China is down. They have tried several measures, including rate cuts, currency devaluation, but still their economy is not performing. On the other hand, our competitors like Brazil and Russia are also not in a position to perform because of commodities coming down. The GST should be through because GST can increase the pace of GDP.
The infrastructure sector's growth also slowed to a 3-month low in July. Output of crude oil, natural gas and steel were down. The expansion in 8 core sectors, which contribute about 38% to the overall industrial production, was 4.1% in July last year. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Well, close on the heels of the GDP figures, the industry is endorsing the Finance Minister's view on low interest rates for faster economic growth. Further, with investment declining consistently in the last 2 to 3 years, the RBI is under tremendous pressure to announce a rate cut in its next monetary policy review.
The Finance Minister leading the demands for a bank rate cut, reigniting industry's hopes for a low interest rate regime. Both retail and wholesale inflation are at record lows. But in the August monetary policy review, the Reserve Bank Governor chose to overrule the majority view of Technical Advisory Committee to lower rates.
There are 2 things in India which act as a natural disincentive. One is the high cost of capital. The other is the high cost of land itself. I think these 2 need to be set right by India if we are to take a leap which is towards a constant growth of 10% per annum spread over a decade or 2 decades.
Over the years, the investment is steadily declining. So much so that the last 2 years of the UPA government were dubbed as a policy paralysis. But even after the first year of NDA government, the situation remains unchanged. Credit rating from CRISIL estimates that the overall capital expenditure will fall 2% in 2016. More cause for concern is private investment that will dip 8%. For the past several years, capacity utilization in the manufacturing sector is stuck at 60 to 70%, causing investment to decline.
had the manufacturing sector hopeful that, look, I mean, after next 2 to 3 years, my capacity utilization would reach 100%, they would have certainly undertaken the investment. But that hope is not there, and they are probably still waiting for that kind of a demand to come about.
Slow credit growth is another worry for the government. Non-food credit demand is at a record low, growing 13% last June but declining 8% this year. It is the worst performance for loan demands in the 2 decades. However, the RBI is hopeful that the demand will pick up during the festival season in October. The industry is also hoping for a substantial rate cut in September monetary policy review. It could boost consumption in the festive season. Krishnanand Tripathi's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
So what do these figures mean for Indian economy? Let's get a perspective on that. Mr. Himanshu Vats, who is the senior editor with the Economic Times, is now joining us. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Sir, now the June quarter GDP growth has deaccelerated to 7%. Do you think now that it will be feasible for the government to meet its annual growth projection of 8 to 8.5% GDP growth?
Well, it's still possible to meet the target, although the first quarter number is not very promising. But the general view is that, plenty of steps which the government has taken to unclog various projects. There is momentum coming in, say, road construction and a few sectors. There could be some action in, telecom or aviation. The general view is that, the fruit of some of the efforts which the government has made for the last year and a quarter, we would see in the quarters ahead. So the government target for a higher GDP growth of 8 and higher is still within reach. But yes, this is a setback in a, overall global economy, which is not very promising.
So you mentioned about the reforms. Of course, the loss of momentum in growth is going to put the spotlight on these reforms. What are these reforms that actually a government really needs to pay urgent attention to?
Well, in my opinion, one key major reform that needs to be done is the GST. It will be perhaps the biggest tax reform since independence. And if that can be done, it will really unclog many sectors of the economy, remove many artificial bottlenecks. So that is something the country really needs. And anybody who thinks good for the economy will be hoping that there's some way the major political parties can get together and resolve the differences over this so that this can be pushed through. So, that alone, I think, not only will it be a game changer as far as the economy is concerned, but the general message and the impact on sentiment, which is also very important in economic development, that will also make a lot of difference. So if there's one reform which the country needs to do immediately, it is the GST.
GST is the big reform that the government should look at. And as far as now RBI is concerned, there have been demands from Modi's administration for a rate cut. And with these figures that we are seeing now, do you think RBI is now going to comply?
It certainly would be under more pressure to cut the rates. And what the RBI said very clearly in the last monetary statement, that it is watching various factors. And it's very keen that inflation and inflationary expectations should be controlled. One of the things it needed to watch was the monsoon and the impact on agriculture. So by the time the next statement comes, the picture will be very clear. There have been some concern about the rising price of pulses, cooking oil, onions. Onion, of course, are being controlled now. Pulses, I think a lot of imported quantities are going to arrive. And once the growth slows down, that itself is, as your question implied, that's going to have a big pressure on the RBI to cut rates or give a clear indication that it is going to.
Yes.
People are already talking of 2 more cuts in the current fiscal year. So there's a good chance.
All right. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us and sharing your perspective on that story. And let's move on in the bulletin now. Well, fuel prices have been reduced for the 3rd time this month. Today, petrol price was reduced by 2 rupees per litre, while the cost of diesel has been reduced by 50 paise per litre. Since last price change, there has been a decrease in international prices of both petrol and diesel. Rupee-US dollar exchange rate has depreciated, adding to the downward revision in prices. And now, another big story. In a landmark decision, the Law Commission has recommended abolition of death penalty. However, with an exception to death penalty in terror cases. Now, 3 members of the commission have dissented from the report. Last year, the Supreme Court had asked the Law Commission to study the issue of death penalty and submit a report on it. The commission held wide-ranging consultations on the issue, where majority of the participants, including representatives of some political parties, favoured abolition of the death penalty. Remember, India is one of 59 countries in the world where the death penalty is still awarded by courts.
Commission has given its 262nd report on the death penalty, and the recommendation is that death penalty should be abolished ultimately, and as a first step there should be abolition of the death penalty for the offences other than terror related offences or offence of against India.
And in other news, the stalemate over one rank, one pension issue continues as Finance Minister Arun Jaitley completely ruled out the annual revision of pensions as demanded by the agitating ex-servicemen. However, he said that the government will safeguard interests of soldiers retiring at an early age through higher pensions.
It's been close to 3 months now since the veterans been agitating, seeking faster implementation of the one rank, one pension. Despite several rounds of talks, there is no solution in sight. Instead, the government has toughened its stance on the veterans' demand for an annual revision of pension. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley justified the government's decision, saying such revision in pensions does not happen anywhere in the world. Jaitley assured the agitating ex-servicemen under one rank, one pension that the government is committed to safeguarding their interests. He said the only difficulty was arising at the stage of arithmetical translation of the scheme. Jaitley said making unreasonable concessions will only set a precedent for others to seek similar benefits. The government, however, is willing to offer higher pensions for soldiers retiring at an early age but not revise it every year. Meanwhile, despite 6 veterans on hunger strike being hospitalized, the protests continue at the Jantar Mantar. Opposition too questioned the government's intent on resolving the stalemate.
किसी की बुरी आंख न लगे ये हम कहा करते थे। आज हमारी सरकार ने हमारे ऊपर बुरी आंख लगा दी है। सर हम बहुत दुखी हैं, हमें आंखों में आंसू आते हैं।
Window is very narrow, and I do not think this government will be sincere and committed to the issue of one rank, one pension, and now they may take excuse of bigger elections, model code of conduct coming into effect.
देखिए, सरकार ने, प्रधानमंत्री ने कहा था कि अच्छे दिन आने वाले हैं, उनके अच्छे दिन आ गए, अब उन्हें बाकी किसी की परवाह नहीं है.
The protests have now entered its 78th day, with many more lending their voice to the veterans' demands. On Monday, former BJP leader Ram Jethmalani also joined the protest and backed their demands. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
The senior IAS officer Rajiv Merishi today replaced L.C. Goyal as the Home Secretary. Now, his appointment for a 2-year period was announced on the day he was due to retire. Merishi was serving as Secretary in the Department of Economic Affairs in the Finance Ministry. A government statement said that Goyal, who took charge 7 months ago, sought voluntary retirement, which was approved by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Goyal was appointed Home Secretary on 5th of February after then Home Secretary Anil Goswami was sacked for allegedly trying to prevent the CBI from arresting former Union Minister Matang Singh in the Sarda chit fund scam. In news tonight, we'll take a very short break. Up next, Supreme Court allows Jains to practice Santhara, a ritual of voluntary and systematic fasting to death. Details to follow. Stay with us.
Land ordinance lapses. States to decide on land acquisition laws, says PM Modi. Is this the final outcome? And is it the best one? Watch The Big Picture at 9:30 p.m. on Rajya Sabha television. Get live Rajya Sabha session. News, views, reports and analysis you can trust on social media. Subscribe, follow, like Rajya Sabha television.
Welcome back after the break. Let's move on in the bulletin now. Well, NDA allies have been unable to reach a seat-sharing agreement for the upcoming Bihar Assembly polls. The leaders met at BJP President Amit Shah's residence in New Delhi on Monday. Denying divisions within the alliance, the parties are confident of getting a majority in the Bihar Assembly.
A meeting between NDA allies at BJP President Amit Shah's residence did not throw up a seat-sharing agreement. However, the allies tried to put up a united face. LJP leader and Union Cabinet Minister Ram Vilas Paswan in fact said that a decision will be made within the week.
प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी हम लोग के एनडीए के नेता हैं. प्रधानमंत्री जी ABCDEFGHIJKLMNOP जिसको क्या कहते हैं कि बना देंगे, हम मोहर मार देंगे.
Claiming that the alliance will get a full majority in Bihar, Rashtriya Lok Samta Party President Upendra Kushwaha and Hindustan Awam Morcha Chief Jitan Ram Manjhi also said there will be a decision soon.
हम लोगों का एक ही मकसद है, एनडीए कैसे 243 जगह जीते, क्योंकि एनडीए अच्छा बहुमत के साथ जीतेगा तो हम ठीक से सरकार चला पाएंगे. तो अभी मकसद हम लोगों का यही है, बाकी बातों पर ध्यान देने की जरूरत नहीं.
जैसे डेट अनाउंस होगा उसके पहले सीट शेयरिंग का मामला तय हो जाएगा. हमारे एनडीए में सीट शेयरिंग का कोई प्रॉब्लम ही नहीं है.
The NDA leaders were also critical of the RJD-JDU Congress combined, saying the turnout at their rally was proof enough that people of Bihar wanted change.
कल की रैली में न कोई ताली बजा रहा था, न कोई उत्साह था, न कोई उमंग थी, लेकिन नरेंद्र मोदी की रैली में जो उत्साह उमंग है, एक बदलाव और परिवर्तन का लोगों ने मन बना लिया है और सभी हमारे गठबंधन के सहयोगी दल मिलजुल कर चुनाव लड़ेंगे.
In the meeting, the allies also decided to avoid mudslinging among themselves. With inputs from Pranav Goswami, Bureau Report for Rajya Sabha TV.
And the other big story of the day, the Karnataka government has decided to refer the Kalburgi murder case to the CBI. Meanwhile, the state government has ordered a CID probe into the murder of the progressive Kannada thinker and scholar. Remember, Kalburgi was shot dead at his residence by two unidentified men on Sunday. Here's a report.
A CID probe has been ordered into the murder of noted scholar and progressive Kannada thinker M.M. Kalburgi. Ordering the probe on Monday, Karnataka Chief Minister Siddaramaiah promised to bring the assailants to book.
CID. Because our people will inquire into it and they will investigate. Whoever behind this incident will catch them and will punish them in accordance with the law.
Thousands paid their last tributes to the former Vice-Chancellor of Hampi University at his hometown in Dharwad. Political leaders from various parties were also present.
He was a great man and he has given lot of things to the country and the state. Everybody is appreciating that gentleman like anything.
There should be zero tolerance to such divisive sectarian attacks on rationalists, on creative writers, on educationalists, because it is not the first case in India.
विचारों के जो टकराव है, इस टकराव में दक्षिणपंथी वो जम नहीं पा रहे हैं और इसी के चलते वो एक व्यक्ति को रास्ते से हटा देने का जो रास्ता लिया है, इससे साफ पता चलता है कि उनका विचारों के अंदर वो दम नहीं है जिसके चलते वो लोगों का दिल जीत सकता है.
This is not what India is about. India is a country where we have always had the right to have different beliefs. What Dr. Kalburgi believed in and wrote about were things that the Charvaka philosophers have said and written 3,000 years ago. This is part of the great Hindu and Indian tradition of belief and diversity of thought and action.
Kalburgi was a renowned scholar of Vachana literature. He often quoted controversy for its outspoken stand, Drawing the ire of religious groups for denouncing idol worship and superstition, police are looking at several angles in solving the murder, including the role of Hindu fundamentalists. Kalburgi was shot dead from close range. He took 2 bullets, one in his forehead and the other on his chest. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And some other stories from across the nation in Nationwide. The Supreme Court has stayed the Rajasthan High Court order declaring Santhara a criminal offence and issued a notice to the centre and the Rajasthan government. The bench was hearing a batch of petitions filed by various religious bodies of the Jain community against the High Court order on Santhara. Santhara is a Jain ritual of voluntary and systematic fasting to death. Heavy torrential rains have flooded several areas in Jalpai, West Bengal. Around 100 villages and more than 10,000 people have been affected. The army has built temporary embankments to halt soil erosion and prevent water from entering residential areas. Relief camps have been set up by the government with food and medicine supply. Odisha BJP is planning protests on 2nd of September against what they say is a crumbling health situation in the state. The party has accused the BJP government of the state of failing to take steps to check the rising number of infant deaths at Shishu Bhavan in Cuttack. At least 47 infants died in a span of 9 days. The Supreme Court today dismissed a petition seeking cancellation of bail to actor Salman Khan, convicted and sentenced in a hit-and-run case. Salman was given bail the very day he was convicted and sentenced by a sessions court. He was found guilty in 2002 hit-and-run case and sentenced to 5 years jail for various charges, including culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with Mohan Lyuketoft, President-elect of the 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly. The Prime Minister conveyed India's expectations to achieve concrete forward movement on the UN Security Council reform negotiations under his presidency. The two also discussed finalization of the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. India's bid for a permanent seat on the UNSC recently suffered a setback when the US, Russia and China opposed negotiations to reform the UN body. Now, these nations refused to contribute to a text that will form the basis for the long-drawn reform process. United Nations will commemorate its 70th session in New York next month, during which the negotiating text on the UNSC reforms might be ratified.
Our expectation and hope is that we should begin substantive negotiations in the intergovernmental negotiations format on UN Security Council reform, so that the Security Council, which still reflects the geopolitical architecture of 1945, is reformed and is able to reflect current realities and also include many more developing countries in its decision-making structure.
On to the big international story. Well, the European Union has called for an emergency meeting amid an escalating migrant crisis in the Mediterranean region. Now, talks are slated later on 14th of September. France, Germany and the UK made a special request to the European Union for crisis talks as they grapple with a huge migrant influx.
Thousands of migrants are flowing in from Middle East and West Africa, and the European nations just don't know what to do about it. The UN estimates that a record number of 1,75,000 reached European borders last month. Britain, France and Germany have called for urgent action. European Union leaders are holding emergency talks in Brussels on September 14th.
Banden immer brutaler und skrupelloser vorgehen, und dem müssen wir entgegentreten mit stärkeren und härteren Maßnahmen.
European Union leaders are expected to discuss internal cooperation, fighting trafficking and a return policy. Germany, France and the UK want the European Union to establish a list of safe countries of origin that will allow immediate repatriation of some migrants. A war of words has emerged. France is blaming Hungary for erecting a razor wire fence along its border with Serbia.
Nobody's treating us like as a human being here, everybody in police, or if you go to city, somewhere police see us, hey, go jungle, like we are human beings.
Several hundred migrants boarded trains in southern Macedonia on their way to Serbia on Sunday. The government provided trains transport migrants through Macedonia and drops them off at country's northern border with Serbia. Austria expanded border checks after the shocking discovery of 71 dead migrants in a lorry near the border with Hungary. Hundreds more drowned in Mediterranean last week attempting to reach Europe from Libya. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Let's now get you more news and updates from across the globe in Global Buzz. One National Guard member has been killed and about 100 injured after clashes erupted outside Ukraine's parliament on Monday. The violence took place after lawmakers gave initial approval to constitutional changes granting more autonomy to separatists in eastern Ukraine. 265 lawmakers voted in favor of the reforms at a stormy session of parliament. The Islamic State has destroyed part of the most important temple at the ancient Syrian site of Palmyra. The extent of the damage to the 2,000-year-old temple of Bel is not clear, but local residents describe being shaken by a large explosion. The reports come a week after the terrorist group blew up another temple at the ancient city. The militants seized control of Palmyra in the month of May. Malaysia's Prime Minister Najib Razak has refused to resign despite mass protests and has called for national unity. Tens of thousands of people took onto the streets over the weekend demanding that Razak step down over allegations of corruption. The Prime Minister denies any wrongdoing. Malaysian government reclaimed the streets of the capital on Monday, staging its own show of force with colourful National Day celebrations attended by thousands. Thai police chief has announced a public reward of $83,000 to be distributed to his own men after they apprehended a suspect in the deadly bombing at Bangkok's Erawan Shrine. The blast last week killed 20 people. One man has been arrested and warrants have been issued for 2 other people. On to cricket now. Well, India has the edge in the final test against Sri Lanka. The hosts suffered early setbacks, chasing a target of 386 runs to win the test. Earlier, Indian batsmen put up strong resistance against the Lankan bowlers and managed to score 274 runs in the second innings. Rohit Sharma and Ravichandran Ashwin scored half centuries, while Stuart Binney missed it by just 1 run. For Sri Lanka, Prasad and Pradeep took 4 wickets each. In reply, Sri Lanka started disastrously, losing 3 wickets for 21 runs. Ishant Sharma picked up 2 wickets, while Umesh Yadav claimed 1. India now have the whole of the 5th day to claim the remaining 7 wickets to win their first test series in Lanka in 22 years.
Going into the 5th day, obviously it will assist spinners a little bit, but our fast bowlers have been doing the job for us in this game. They bowled really well, so yeah, I expect nothing but to come out and give the same effort as we did in the first inning.
And more sporting action now in Sports Beat. Recovering his stand at the Sinke Field Club Cup, 5-time world champion Vishwanathan Anand played out his 4th draw. His match against Dutchman Anish Giri in the 6th round helped Anand to joint 8th spot. But the Indian Grandmaster still has a lot of ground to cover in the remaining 3 rounds of the tournament. Russian 3rd seed Maria Sharapova has pulled out of the US Open following a knee injury. Sharapova expressed disappointment at not being ready for the tournament in time. Her exit now allows Daria Kasatkina of Russia to qualify for the draw. It will also be a bonus for top-ranked Serena Williams, easing her path to a calendar year Grand Slam sweep. Swansea came back from a goal down to stun Manchester United 2-1 in the English Premier League on Sunday night. It was Swansea's 3rd straight win over Manchester United. Juan Mata opened the scoring for United in the 48th minute. Andre Ayew and Bafetimbi Gomez led the fight back as the 2 goals in 5 minutes were enough to seal the victory for the Welsh side. That's all in this bulletin. Thanks for watching.